Hello, everyone. It's me, David Chen. I'm here with Patrick Willems to discuss Andor Season 2. Now, I had originally not planned to do any more episodes about Andor. Patrick Willems, it was an intense flurry of podcasts we made about this show, did we not?
It really was, yeah. I wish we could have done it for several months like we did
Absolutely.
back in 2022. Sadly, it was 4 short episodes, but fun
Indeed.
episodes.
Absolutely. And I was sick for two of them, and so it was like not or like at least one of them. Anyway, it was not like the greatest sort of the most thorough job we could have done
I
just because of how short the time period was. And yeah, go
I
ahead.
mean, I think we did a pretty good job, all things considered. Also, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling a lot better, thank you. But uh anyway, after the show ended, there were so many things that had popped up, so many follow-ups. I don't know if you're aware of this, Patrick Williams. I think Tony Gilroy gave approximately, I'm gonna put it out there, 420 interviews.
And
Uh,
I have almost listened to all of them.
yes. No love for the Decoding TV audience in those interviews, though. I don't know what happened there. But anyway,
Should we have
he
reached out? Because he was talking to
he was talking to
everybody.
everyone. If you had a podcast, he was talking to you. If you had a mic, if you had a TikTok profile, he was talking to you. We probably could
Also,
have
he
got
was
Tony.
We probably could also, he was doing so many of these, like, live in New York City,
Yeah,
where I am.
yeah, you
I'm
totally
like,
could have.
I if I just walked up to him on the street and put a microphone in front of him, he probably would have talked to me.
Absolutely. So anyway, he's been giving tons of interviews and saying a lot of stuff. What's great about Tony Gilroy is he is somebody who clearly DGAF. He does not care about his reputation. He does not care if Disney hires it. Like he probably has enough money to survive the rest of his life and never work again. So he's just like, whatever. I'm just going to say whatever the hell I want.
It also
So
seems like that general vibe is, like, what got him hired in the first place. Like, when he
yes,
tells the story about how he ended up doing the show, he, like, didn't care about Star Wars, and then they're like, "Well, we wanna do an Andor show." He's like, "I don't know. Well, like, this is what I would do, but, like, doesn't matter because I don't wanna do the show." And yeah, my favorite thing was in one of the interviews when he said, like, "Hey, I'm off the chain now. I'm allowed to say fascism."
amazing, amazing. All right. So, anyway, we wanted to do like a brief follow up episode talking about a bunch of the stuff that has come out since the final episodes of Andor were released. Really grateful to Patrick Willems for joining me for this podcast. So, I have a bunch of stuff, feedback, interview clips I have collected. A lot of this podcast episode is probably going to consist of me reading to Patrick and then Patrick reacting to it. But hey, it's cool. All right, let's
I
do
can't
this.
wait to find out what we misunderstood or maybe mispronounced or
Mm.
just everything we got wrong.
Well, let's start with this point. Now, I will tell you the most feedback I got. I mean, in general, if I critiqued any aspect of Andor, I got a lot of feedback. But I will say the most feedback I got was for my comments saying that, hey, Rogue One and the whole Tivik thing, it doesn't quite line up, or it kind of minimizes some of the stuff that happens at the end of Andor season 2 because Tivik tells Andor at the beginning of Rogue One about the planet killer weapon. So, like, what's the whole point of Luthen needing to give that information? And many people wrote in, including Evil Ducks 3710 from YouTube,
Oh
who
man,
I
evil
believe
ducks.
is a decoding TV subscriber, writes in the context of Tivik giving Cassian the info. I don't think the rebellion would have taken it seriously if it was only from him. He didn't seem like they thought of him all that much. What it did provide them was independent verification of the story they got from Luthen, which convinces the Rebel Council that the Death Star is real. It's two unrelated sources of info that had both info about Galen Erso and the weapon. So it goes from being a Luthen paranoid hallucination in their mind to something very real. End quote. So I will leave it to people out there to decide for themselves how closely it lines up or how significant Luthen's contributions are at the end of Andor. But I wanted to say I got a lot of feedback and criticism about my comments at the end, and totally fair. Like, I think many people basically pointing out that the importance of Luthen's comments and also Tivik are that they are two separate, unrelated sources that verify this information, and that is useful. So,
And David Chen, you learned your lesson to never criticize anything in Andor again.
indeed, or at least don't get things so horribly wrong. You know what I mean?
I don't.
So, you know.
No, I think I totally got where you were coming from,
Yeah.
and again, actually, here's a question: Have you, since Andor finished, have you rewatched Rogue One?
I haven't rewatched Rogue One in its entirety, but I did rewatch that part of the movie to which I clipped for the podcast.
Right,
Um, and yeah, but go ahead. Yep.
because I have not,
Yeah.
but I have heard from so many people
Yes.
that Rogue One like greatly improves, like after Andor, even just things like that, like were totally unintentional when they made Rogue One, because obviously that they made that movie, like almost a decade ago. Uh, but just like they have now like added like like emotional context that just makes things in it hit harder. And so I'm excited to rewatch it. And yeah, we'll see how it is now.
I will say a few things. First of all, I've heard from a lot of people saying like Rogue One is like a great finale for the Andor series, and in
Mhm.
fact, the final 3 episodes of Andor season 2 really feel like they're structured to lead directly into Rogue One. I mean, I think literally moment like hours or days after Andor season 2 ends is like some of the scenes from Rogue One. So,
Yeah.
uh, uh, so that's definitely a piece of a commentary I've heard a lot of. I will say that the one thing I think really benefits from Andor season 2 is Saw Gerrera's storyline, which felt super abridged in Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. Now feels very rich and feels like, oh wow, like with the Andor season 2, like Saw Gerrera feels like a complete idea in a
Yeah.
way that he didn't before Andor season 2 was released. So
Right. It's I know like we said, Tony Gilroy's been doing a lot of interviews, and I've been listening and are watching a lot of them. And a thing like one of the things he's mentioned multiple times that has made me really want to rewatch Rogue One is that like he's talking about like when they were in the writers' room, they would like have the beginning info of Rogue One like up on like a board being like, we have to
mhm.
like connect exactly to this. Like that was the goal they were like running toward. And so it seems like they were so clear about, we have to connect everything to this, that like yeah, like, remembering your criticism of the final few episodes, I was like, maybe they did know what they were doing, because they seem to have been, like, really strict about, like, connecting,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
2. But, yeah, and it is, again, just the weird thing of, like, this leads so perfectly into Rogue One, which really does, seem like a finale to it, and it's just weird that Jyn Erso, this character who is never mentioned in Andor, is suddenly going to like pop up at the very end, and then be the person who makes everything happen.
Yeah.
Kind of like the jokes I was making like on the podcast about like Luke Skywalker just rolls in at the very last second and like is the hero after everyone in Andor has sacrificed so much over so many years.
Yeah, that's a great point, Patrick, that I was going to bring up later. The Jyn Erso question. Like, why is Jyn Erso not mentioned in the show? Uh, Tony Gilroy actually gave an interview to Entertainment Weekly where he talked about potentially putting Jyn Erso or mentioning her in Andor season 2. Um, here's a quote from him. I always thought, oh my God, I'm going to have to deal with Tivik the spy, says Gilroy. Should I deal with Galen Erso? And was there anyone else? I really thought I was going to have to use Danny Mays as Tivik. I thought, well, we probably should. And then he didn't do that. We didn't see
Yeah.
Tivik, but like he really thought it through about like should Tivik be in the show, and he decided not to. And then he changed his mind about that, and also all the way to Jyn. He said, in the end, I realized if people didn't absolutely have to be there, they shouldn't. And it would have been lame to bring Jyn back as a cameo. That would have been really disrespectful in a way. I'd rather honor Rogue and keep it straight. Which
Yeah,
I thought was
yeah.
interesting. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
mean, I can't think of a way that she would have like fit into Andor unless there was like one shot of her in that final montage. As he's
Right.
like walking to the ship.
And that would have
But
felt it would have felt out of place, I think. Like it would have been jarring.
yeah, she's not in this show. But
Yeah.
again, it's the thing that I'm just curious about when I do rewatch Rogue One, which I'll probably do this week, is just like one of my biggest criticisms of that movie is just the Jyn Erso character.
Yeah.
And now, having seen all of Andor, I'm just like, I understand the whole thing about like her father like putting the little like flaw in like basically like it being that father-daughter relationship like leading to the eventual Death Star destruction. But I'm just like, honestly, like what could you have told that story with just Cassian as the lead? She's not.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I hate Jyn Erso. I'm just. I think she's a somewhat. It's truly, and we talked about this back
I
in
agree. Yeah,
2022.
we thought. Yeah,
Yeah,
go and watch our Rogue One review. We talked
it's
about. I will say, Jyn Erso has one really good line in the movie that I think is highly relevant to our times, and also kind of ties in with Andor in many ways. Early on in the movie, Saw Gerrera asks Jyn Erso, "You can stand to see the Imperial flag reign across the galaxy," and Jyn Erso says, "It's not a problem if you don't look up," which I think is very astute and trenchant. Anyway,
yes,
uh,
yes,
there's also a lot of people who watched Rogue One and thought Cassian Andor, like Jyn Erso, is the love of Cassian Andor's life. Like a lot of people watched Rogue One and thought Jyn Erso is the love of Cassian Andor's life. They die together. They have this great bond. And Tony Gilroy's commentary on that is people who thought that was the love of his life are going to have to reorient their thinking. End quote. So if you were a Jyn Erso, Cassian Andor shipper, you're going to have to reorient your thinking. Sorry about that. So
I mean, yeah. Look, I get the impulse because they are two attractive people who are at the center of a movie. But also, at the end of that movie, do they kiss?
no, they
Right
don't.
before they
They
die?
they embrace.
No.
It's very beautiful. It's very beautiful. Actually,
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
okay, let's move on. One of the things we didn't talk about, Patrick Willems, was the blaster that Vel holds up at the end of one of the episodes.
Yeah.
And then Melshi's like, "That's mine," and it's like, what the hell is even we never really even come back to it. So I wanted to explain what the deal was with that. This is actually an entry in Wikipedia. No, sorry. This is the StarWars.fandom.com wiki. The
Oh.
entry is B1NA blaster pistol. For those who are
So we're
curious,
talking this is the B tier Star Wars wiki.
I have no comment on that. But in 5 BBY, Cyril Karn carried one such blaster, designated AD616K6KA. While he was part of the pre-War security inspection team attempting to find and arrest Cassian Andor, who was hiding on Ferrix. Karn's blaster was stolen by Andor, who carried the weapon for a time. During the preparation for a mission on Aldhani, Arvel Skeen became suspicious of Andor after seeing the corporate issue blaster and questioned Andor as to whom it belonged to. After the mission, Andor stashed the weapon away in a hidden box on Niamos, where it was left after he was arrested and detained on the Narkina 5 Imperial prison complex. When Andor later returned to the planet with Ruscott Melshi after their escape from Narkina 5, he retrieved the box and handed the blaster off to Melshi before the two parted ways. Then, 3 years later, 2 BBY, the same blaster was recognized by Vel Sartha during a training instruction at the Rebel base on Yavin 4. As she inquired about the owner of the blaster, Melshi identified himself to her. End quote. End quote. So, Cyril Karn's blaster made it all the way to Melshi's possession, and then Vel's asking, "Why the hell do you have a Corpo blaster?" Like that, But dude, I mean, that is a hardcore. Like, I don't know how many people actually like. It's Cyril Karn's blaster from season 1. I don't know how many people actually recognize. Maybe a lot of people. Maybe like the vast majority of people listening to this or watching this did. But that's a kind of.
I
I would describe that as a deep
I
cut
don't
in
think
my
so.
opinion.
That is a deep cut. Like, we have been, despite evidence to the contrary, we have been paying attention.
Despite
We have
copious evidence to the contrary.
Yes, we have watched all these episodes. I'd say like multiple times. We didn't catch that. That's the thing. Like, I only learned about it. I think, I don't know, some like post online that was just like, whoa, like look at the route this blaster took. It started out here, and then it ended up here. And I'm just, it's the impressive thing considering that when you hear them talk about the way they wrote this show, where it's like, well, 4 of us got in a room for 1 week, then we broke off and wrote our episodes, and I'm like, and they're like, yeah, and like they wrote this so fast that it's amazing that they had that level of detail, and like in terms of like the continuity of one random gun that showed up in episode 3 of season 1, and they tracked that and where it, like where it went this whole time. I'm just like, again, these writers are very good. Tony Gilroy is very good. I'm impressed that like if I was writing the show, I probably would not even think about that blaster, because it's Star Wars. There's so many blasters.
Yes. Why do you need to deal with a blaster? Uh, I am curious. Kind of like, does it all amount to anything, or is it just like a cool, like, oh, he still has the blaster. He still has Cyril's blaster from season. Like, is this supposed to be anything more than, oh, Melshi has Cyril's blaster from season 1? Like, do you think there's any
I mean,
more significance there?
I think that moment where Melshi is like, "It's mine," is
Yeah.
less about, "Oh, it's the blaster," and more like, "Hey, here's Melshi from
Melshi's
his
here.
buddy." Yeah, his buddy from the prison. Now he's part of the rebellion too.
Right. And they have this
Yeah.
blaster from Cyril Karn's legacy lives on in the blaster. So
Look, like, okay, when are we gonna get Blaster, a Star Wars story that just charts the progression of that blaster being passed to different people? Like, who know, maybe that blaster ends up being wielded in the sequel trilogy. Maybe that's the blaster that is eventually used to kill Hux. Doesn't Hux get shot with
so
the
true.
blaster? I'm sorry to bring up Rise of Skywalker, but
Yeah.
but yeah, who knows? Who knows
Appreciate that. Appreciate that memory, Patrick.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I'm just like, what did that blaster go on to do?
we are broadcasting live right now at youtube.com/@decodingtv. So we're willing to take people's questions probably towards the end of this broadcast. But in the meantime, there's I have like 4 or 5 other points I wanted to bring up with you. The matter of Kleya. Now, one of the things I like about Tony Gilroy, other than that he gives no Fs, is he also clearly has a high estimation of his own abilities, which I think is like in general fine because he's a very gifted storyteller. But Tony Gilroy speaking to Entertainment Weekly about Kleya's backstory. So they gave us Luthen and Kleya's backstory in the final episodes of Andor. There was another powerful motivator for Gilroy to tell Kleya's backstory. He wanted to be the one to tell it. Quote, I think our curiosity about what that relationship is about is huge. I wanted to make sure that everybody wasn't writing a story about that I didn't want them to write. That's always present. I didn't want anyone to think there was anything sexual or anything romantic or anything weird or anything confusing. I really wanted to define it before anybody else tried to define it. If you don't define it, somebody else will. I wonder who he's talking about, Patrick. I wonder who he's talking about. I don't think he's talking about people writing on the fan forums. Anyway, in Gilroy's view, Kleya ends up defining Luthen. The girl who plays her young, April Woods, holy crap, she just transfused that steel all the way through. And you realize Kleya is the organizing principle in that shop. Kleya is the muscle there. Kleya is the stalwart. He's only there because he's so guilty, and he's conforming to her reality all the way through. It's pretty tricky to have an adult with a child doing terrorism and not make it feel manipulative. He's been afraid of her from the moment he looked in that cage and saw her. She is his transformation, and that's a pretty unusual story to be able to tell, end quote. I'm just going to put this out there, Patrick. I wasn't looking back on the show, that all makes sense what Tony Gilroy is saying. I don't know that I picked up on it the first time I watched it, that it's like Kleya is the driving force behind all of this. Like I don't know that the way the show depicted it made me feel that, but it's true that I guess like the reason that they're doing all this terrorism is because Kleya's people have been wronged. Like it's not Luthen's
Right.
people that have been wronged. Theoretically, Luthen and his folks have been killing Kleya's people, and so like it's Kleya that's like driving the action, and that's kind of Tony's position on how that all has gone down. Anyway, any thoughts on that, Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, in the flashbacks in episode 10, we have like 3 of them, right?
I think that's right. Yeah, three
Yeah,
or four.
it's
Yeah,
about so and they're fairly short, and so it's not like we see their entire relationship get
yeah,
fleshed out. We don't see, like, the moment where they're like, "Okay, what if we started, like, doing this like, we get brief little, like, snapshots of their relationship and, and the way it progresses, and so it's not, like, spelled out, like, super explicitly, like, beat for beat for beat, um, but you can read between the lines or just, like, from what's there, it's like, okay, you see initially he is, like, in a war, but clearly, like, his heart is not in it, and then you see him, like, okay, he's just, like a merchant
yeah,
basically, just he's just and then you see her witnessing a public execution and stuff like that, and so you do see like, oh, it is from them being together that then suddenly he starts taking a more active role in revolution or terrorist activities, that kind of thing. But there is never like a conversation where she's like, we need to do this now. And yeah, which I think is look, I would gladly just watch a like 6-episode miniseries that is just the Luthen Kleya backstory, assuming that like the writers of Andor worked on it. But yeah, like again, it is not super spelled out, but like, you get the gist of it, that she from was playing an active role in things as a child, that she was like activated, especially like watching that public execution in that one flashback scene. I do get Gilroy's impulse to be like, let's cover this because it's Star Wars. Every story that could be told, every backstory, any question anyone is ever going to have is going to be told in a comic book miniseries or a novel or something. And so, yeah, probably good that they covered it here. That said, there's still plenty of of territory that has not been covered yet. That I'm sure there will be future things
yeah, yeah.
like,
I
yeah,
mean, so the amazing Crapo in the chat says Star Wars Begins Origins: The Rise of Kleya. That's going to be a future show. Now, here's the thing. I agree with Tony Gilroy that like this is a thing he should have done, and he has defined the relationship between the two of them, and I think that's a good
mhm.
thing. And he's right that if he did not define it, other people would define it. Where I mildly disagree with Tony is what you just said, Patrick Willems, which is I don't think that's going to stop people from trying to make more stories about Kleya and Luther. Like there's literal decades of their relationship we don't see, and so you can imagine in the future, 10 years from now, the adventures of Kleya and Luthen, and it's the prequel to Andor season 2.
Oh
Like
yeah, but also like I don't think Gilroy's thought here is like, I don't want anyone to ever touch these characters again. It's just like, I want to just define
yes,
what that
what
relationship
it
is.
is, what it is. Yeah,
Because here's the thing. There was also there was another interview with, oh actually no, this was an interview I think it might have been with Tom Bissell, writer of
yes.
the final arc, talking about a thing that
I
David, did
I
you
I
listen?
I have quotes from that interview that I was going to bring up as well.
Okay.
He talks about
From the Q&A with Jeff
yeah,
Goldsmith interviews.
backstory. He
Yeah.
says, I was going to bring up another point about the Kleya backstory, which is, first of all, they show a bombing that they execute right in the show, and we knew we were like when I was watching the show, I was like, oh, this is a Naboo-like planet. I took in my notes. It
Yep.
turns out it was Naboo. We knew we were going to show their first act of terrorism. This is Tom Bissell, the writer, talking to Backstory Magazine. We knew we were going to show their first act of terrorism, Kleya and Luthen together, and I argued it should be on Naboo because that's the Emperor's home planet. And if Luthen is going to make his first public statement, I think he's going to stick his thumb into the eye of the guy he hates more than anyone. So Tony heard my reasoning. He was like, I like that. Let's do that. So it's on Naboo. It's their first act of terrorism. And it ends with Luthen blowing up this bridge, and then walking away. Basically, the first thing he taught her, how to be an insurgent, right? So, end quote. Anyway, that was a more context on Kleya and Luthen's first act of terrorism.
Yeah. Very cool stuff. But the quote that I was going to bring up
Yeah,
was apparently Bissell said that a thing that Gilroy said to him about his philosophy about like writing in like IP worlds
Mm-hmm.
is to, instead of using, this is not a direct quote, but instead of trying to use all of the toys in the toy box, put back more toys than were in there like when you opened it.
I love that.
And yeah, and so and it's the thing where like they have created an astonishing number of characters
Yeah.
in this show, and and I think it would, considering, you know, how Star Wars works with like so much affiliated media, I think it would be a bummer if these characters were never touched again. And so look, here's the thing. I'm if they, you know, release some like comic book about like what Kleya got up to like during the events of the original trilogy, I will read it. I want to know. You know, if there is a story about Dedra's time on Narkina, whatever, I want to know about it. I like, as much as I I I doubt anything will reach the level of Andor. I'm not like, you know, some hardline person who's like, only if Gilroy is writing it. If he's not, then I don't want it. I'm like, no, no, I love these characters, and I am curious about you know, what their stories are, you know, beyond BBY1.
All right, moving on. I saw this quote that Tony Gilroy gave to, I believe this is Hollywood Reporter now I'm reading, about Siril Karn. I just thought you'd appreciate this. The question was asked of him, in those final moments, could Siril have tilted into joining the rebellion? Tony Gilroy says, I've always viewed him right from the beginning as a romantic and a fantasist that has this incredibly rich internal life. And I think a lot of times that people go where they're liked, where they're encouraged. There is a scenario under which he might have taken an entirely different path. I think you can see on Gorman that he likes it there. He's grown comfortable there. It certainly appeals to his fashion sense and to his fastidiousness. When the massacre happens, so many things are upended for him and have come undone. The amount of chaos that's been visited on his soul is almost incomprehensible. And then to see Cassian through this dream state, to see the person you have been chasing for years, and then to have them not even know who you are. I feel for all these characters, but I'm really sympathetic towards Siril, end quote. That's where I think you are too, Patrick Willems. That's where I think you are too.
Uh, it's true. It's true. Yeah, I think as much as I know Gilroy has talked about this in other interviews, you know, Dedra is like a true fascist. She is like a true believer, like born and raised in the Empire,
Yeah.
like all about this. Siril is a guy who just like played with like toys of like stormtroopers as a kid, and is just kind of like,
Right.
you know, yeah, like kind of just like was drawn to kind of like aesthetic, like it's like you know, a kid who watches like cop shows and is like, cool, I wanna do that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and and uh and yeah, and that kind of is the tragedy, because near the end of his life, he's realizing the lie that he had kind of like been drawn into. But yeah, I like, if he had not gotten shot in the head, I absolutely don't think that he would have joined the rebellion. This is not like some black or white
Right.
world where it's like, well, either you were like an
Yeah.
imperial officer, or you're like a rebellion, like insurgent revolutionary
Yeah.
person. It's like,
Yeah.
no, he probably would have just like left that behind and become a regular person.
Yeah. Indeed. Indeed. I agree. Uh, Hollywood Reporter asked the question, I kept expecting Andy Serkis's character, Kino Loyd, to pop up as a rebel leader on Yavin 4. Did you ever consider having him back? And before I read Tony Gilroy's answer, I just want to say Tony Gilroy in his interviews has given me a whole new vocabulary for talking about popular culture. Okay, so he says
Mhm.
here, Andy Serkis dropped the mic, man. What am I going to do that's going to be better than what we did? All it does is minimize that moment. I knew a lot of people were talking about whether we had a way of bringing him back, but I didn't want to have that sort of coincidental environment. End quote. I just love that phraseology of like, first of all, he says very rightly, like, yes, if you bring him, it minimizes the thing. If you like go back and like do, agreed 100% of that, and then he's like, I didn't want to have that coincidental environment, which, you know, I
And I'm
thought,
sure people are gonna put like some fans will be like, "But Star Wars is a coincidental
mm,
environment. It's a giant galaxy where people constantly run into each other." Where, but I here's a question, David.
yes, Patrick.
Do you think Tony Gilroy? Do you think Tony Gilroy has seen the Rise of Skywalker?
I don't know. I don't know.
Because it is
I'm
so
gonna I'm
time.
gonna say no. I don't think he has.
I'm gonna if I had to put money on it, I'd say no. But because it's so far away, like timeline wise, from where he was
Yeah,
dealing with, and it doesn't really affect it.
right.
Because it's the kind of thing where I'm just like, the line somehow Palpatine returned is basically like the like based on what I've gleaned from interviews with Gilroy, that is like the ultimate thing he does not want to do. Like that kind of
Right.
that moment. And that's not even
Absolutely.
the worst moment in that movie, but just like that kind of thing is like the antithesis of everything he is trying to do.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing where I'm just like, if he had seen that movie, would he be more tempted to make like a veiled like reference to it
Mm.
when he's talking about things like a coincidental environment?
Despite all of his commentary on across a variety of publications, I have not seen him slander any other Star Wars property, with the
No?
possible exception of Rogue One, which has now spoken quite brutally about how he like basically had to take over that movie.
Yeah.
But
But he still
other
won't go into like real
right,
detail
right,
about like I was watching, I think it was in the Josh Horowitz interview where he's like, "Look, everyone who worked on that movie, we're never really gonna go into the details about
right.
exactly what
There
went
has never
down."
been a full accounting of it, which is fascinating to me still.
There's
I would
like
recommend you listen to the Going Rogue podcast, which does like as good of a job as one can do explaining the difference between what that movie was and what it became. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I know there's one that was really interesting was several years ago, on like a bonus commentary episode of Blank Check. They watched Rogue One with Chris Weitz, who
Mm,
was like the original writer, and he did point out, he's like, "Oh, that was mine. Oh yeah, that changed after I left." And he's
yeah,
like in real time, like
right.
commenting on it, and that's a really interesting listen that gives a bit more insight into the evolution of that movie.
He also says, by the way, Kino Loyd is like Cassian's sister. People wanted to know if we're going to resolve the sister. The sister, to me, in the beginning, is so much more interesting to me as a deficit. She's much more valuable to me for Cassian as an absence. As he says in the end, maybe I should stop saving people. His need to return and save people and to be a savior and the compulsion to do that comes from this hole in his life. And I didn't really want to fill that in. End quote. I already talked about this on the main podcast, but I wanted to mention it again. Okay. Patrick Willems, first of all, I said this would be 30 minutes. We're already way past that. Are you cool to?
Okay.
Yeah, okay, cool. I only have a few more points, and I know you're going to want to discuss them. We got to talk about Mon Mothma. So there's a few Mon Mothma follow-ups. Okay. Um, the first big thing that we didn't really get into in our podcast, I don't think, is Chloris the driver. Now, this is a post on Reddit from C1138BP, who writes, subject, Chloris might have had a change of heart, but we'll never know. One thing I noticed in episode 9 is it looks like Mon Mothma's driver might have had a change of heart and was actually going to try and help her when he was gunned down by Cassian. The show made the point of showing he was armed while he was sitting in the speeder getting his instructions from the ISB supervisor. It then showed him seemingly contemplative, hearing Mon Mothma's speech and getting out of the speeder to seemingly go and find her, defying orders. While he immediately gets gunned down by Cassian out of caution because he knows he's a plant, not allowing him to get a single word out. But I immediately noticed he did not appear to be armed when he was shot. One would think if he was going to try and apprehend Mon Mothma, he would have had a blaster in hand, especially since the showrunners made the point of showing that he had one. Does anyone else think he maybe was actually going to try and help her at that point, as opposed to becoming just another casualty in the conflict and subterfuge? End quote. That was the sense I got from the scenes they showed of the driver, was that he was like being like, "Hey, maybe Mon Mothma has a point about the misinformation of the genocide on this speech, and maybe I shouldn't apprehend." Like, the show leaves it purposefully vague. I think I
Right.
do like that Cassian immediately executing him ties into if you are a fan of this show leading directly into the events of Rogue One, which I was not. But if you are a fan of that, then Cassian executing Cloris the driver is a good prelude to him killing Tivik when Tivik poses like even a mild risk.
Right.
So that it does like match that character moment. But anyway, Patrick, any thoughts on the Cloris situation?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there is no definitive answer here,
Yeah,
because, also, we never spend that much time with Cloris
right.
other than being aware that he is an ISB plant, and then, like, shots of, like, glances of him kind of, like, looking at Mon as she's, talking or whatever, and considering that, this we know so little about this guy's, like, interiority, I think it's a big jump to make to be like, oh, actually, he experienced this whole big arc there in a matter of minutes, and was actually going to switch sides or whatever. And yeah, it's all like I do believe that he may have felt like a moment or two of doubt or maybe questioning things a little bit. He also probably is not like a very bright guy. He's a driver who was just kind of given orders by like, you know, but by like the secret police about like do this. And so I can see him maybe questioning it a little bit. But I don't think again, I'm not even saying Cassian was right to execute him. But I don't think it's that simple. As he would have just immediately been like, "I'm going to help you out now."
In the chat, we have some commentary on this. Noah Davidson writes, "I got the sense he was confused and worried, but not that he would suddenly go rogue."
Yep.
That's another interpretation. I don't think we are on the level of, oh, Cloris is going to become a rebel, from this. But I think he might be like, maybe Mon Mothma isn't bad. Like that's kind of as far as I think it could go. Shatterer in the
Right.
chat says he was pointing at them though, like saying, "Hey, there they are." End quote. So, like, it's open to interpretation, I think. But I
I feel like
wanted
we
to
need to
bring it.
go frame by frame
Right.
through every Cloris moment in that episode just to figure this out. But I think, David, what's so much of this conversation and whether like interview or like questions Gilroy has received or posts online about this show, it really is interesting how I'm like what it's really revealing is the way that we are so used to looking at and talking about Star Wars and the way this show doesn't conform to so much of that, which is that Star Wars has always had a very black and white morality. There is the
Yeah.
dark side and the light side. It is very simple. There's the Empire and there's the Rebellion and the Jedi and the Sith and stuff like that. And you know, everything is always connected and people show back up and they turn out not to be dead and that kind of thing. And that's how Star Wars just is. We're used to Easter eggs and fan service and like, big rewarding like I mean like the very first movie has Han Solo quit and then miraculously show up again at the last minute to save the day. And then this is a show that is basically refusing to do any of that stuff. And so you've got Gilroy having to field these questions that he probably thinks are dumb about, like, hey, what if that character who you implied was dead actually showed up like years later and then was alive? And he's just like, no, why would I do that kind of thing? Human beings don't work that way. That's not how like the world is. And so yeah, I don't think Cloris would have joined the rebellion. I don't think Siril Karn would have joined the rebellion. I think these are human beings who may have expressed complicated feelings, and then probably like most human beings and like most people in the world of Star Wars, would not have like joined a war. They would have simply sat there and watched news about it on the HoloNet.
I completely agree with what you're saying, Patrick Willems, and all that is very well taken. So, Mr. Miguel in the chat says the conversation of whether Cassian should have shot the driver feels like the grown up, nuanced version of the overly memed Han shot first bit. End quote. Which no lies detected. Okay, so speaking of Mon Mothma, her husband Perrin. This was, I think, the most interesting bit that's come out, which was there was a deleted scene that, or not deleted scene makes it sound like they filmed this. I don't think they actually filmed this, but
No,
yeah,
it was in like an earlier
yeah, it was
draft
an
of the
earlier stage. Yeah, so according to writer Tom Bissell, there was going to be an interesting moment. Tony Gilroy performed it with Perrin just saying to Mon Mothma, "I knew what you were up to this whole time. They talked to me. Every week they'd interrogate me. I never said a word. You didn't trust me. You could have trusted me." And the heartbreak she would feel in that moment of this guy that she'd pushed out who could have been reliable. The double heartbreak of her walking away from her life, thinking she's dropping this deadbeat husband who never supported her, and then the double dagger stab. But that's headcanon. That didn't happen, end quote. That is the quote from Tom Bissell. I believe this is in Backstory magazine. And yeah, the Perrin, this kind of throwaway character, I think what this is hinting at is if you are a senator and you are engaging in subterfuge and trying to subvert the empire, it is possible / likely that your loved ones will know that that is occurring because they're not stupid. And they can see like you're acting all kinds of weird ways. And what this deleted idea shows is like, yeah, what if that actually was true and Perrin was somebody that could have been trusted? And that would have been super sad that like Mon Mothma kind of froze him out. Like we never see Mon Mothma let him in at any point, right? Like never allows him to understand the full extent of what she's doing. And yeah, it does make it super sad if that's really what was going on there. So
Yeah, I think that
I'll just say also the amazing Crapo in the chat says he was still a shitty husband. That sounds like he's saying you should be thankful I didn't turn you in. End quote. That's fair, but I think what the person who is a writer on the show is saying is like the point of that scene would have been to establish, hey, you lost something. You lost something here, Mon. You lost something here. Okay, anyway, go ahead.
yeah. I think what Bissell also said in that interview was the idea was that after they leave Coruscant, she would have like stopped by Chandrila for some reason or whatever, and would have talked to him there. It does seem like that idea was probably dropped for pacing issues. It's like, let's just get her out of there and she's gone, rather than making a stop for a conversation along the way. But yeah, I mean, like, here's the thing. That idea does, or I shouldn't say does, because it's not, it's, as he says, it's headcanon. It's not part of the universe of the show.
Yeah.
It would deepen Perrin as a character.
Yes.
Because mostly it's just like, as soon as we're introduced to him, it's like, okay, there's not a lot of heat in this marriage. It's like, it's mostly a formality. Her husband and her daughter don't really, like her very much. They don't have a very good relationship. And so it's like she and Perrin attend events, together, but at home they're not having deep conversations. And so yeah, so we think of Perrin as mostly just this kind of like shallow guy that who's just kind of dead weight.
Right.
And it's an interesting idea that he was like, more observant and, more open to helping with this than we thought. But also, I will say, not having that, but then having that shot of Perrin with Davos Skulden's wife,
Which, by
at
the
the
way,
very
since the show has ended, I do think that it is confirmed that is Skulden's wife. Like you nailed it,
yes.
Patrick Willems. I should never have doubted you. I even deleted some parts of the podcast where I was like really doubtful of when Patrick said that. But having reviewed the footage, it's like, okay, yeah, I think that's Davos Skulden's wife. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. That is such a wonderful ending for that character, in my opinion.
Yes.
And so I am okay with Perrin just being this shitty, shallow guy. But that said, I would love to have seen that other scene because it sounds really interesting.
Yeah. Okay. There was so some people in the chat, Noah is asking, for instance, what happened with he says here, quote, "It's strange that we don't see her daughter more. We don't see what happened with Mon Mothma's daughter." Tony Gilroy actually talked about this a little bit in an interview. I think it was Hollywood Reporter. I'm not 100% sure, but he basically said something that I thought was very interesting, that like sometimes what happens is the parents depart from the orthodoxy, and the children wish to return to the orthodoxy. Like it's like parents who are like atheists, and then their
Mhm.
kids, their whole lineage is religious people, and then the parents become atheists, and then the children are like, no, actually, I want to go back to what that orthodoxy was. And that's kind of what happens with Mon Mothma's child. Is like, yeah, she is much more in the orthodoxy than Mon Mothma. Certainly has no interest in being a rebel, you know. And Tony Gilroy said, "What's going on with Mon Mothma's daughter, Lita, I believe is her name? She's just chilling on Chandrilla. She's just like having her life, enjoying life on Chandrilla. Like that's what she's doing during the rebellion. During the events of the movies. Is she's just like, hey, this is cool. I'm enjoying life here.
Yeah,
So
rich,
yeah,
and
I'm rich.
that
I'm
okay.
rich. So yeah,
Yeah. It's like when, people are saying like, "What about Lita?" I'm just like, we only ever saw Lita in the context of like when Mon would interact with her, and then her daughter gets married and moves to a different planet. Like, why would we see her again? It's not like Lita ever had storylines. Like we saw her wedding because Mon was at the wedding. And so again, it's one of those things where I I would be interested to see how Lita reacts to Mon's speech and be like, "Oh, your mom just had this big political scandal and quit the Senate." You know, I don't know if she would be like, she'd probably just be embarrassed. Just be
Mm,
like, "Oh my god, I can't my mother was always such a weirdo." But but yeah, look here. I didn't miss Lita in
yeah.
the last like 9 episodes.
Hannah Land in the chat has some interesting points. I think the commentary it creates about the Chandrillan gender roles and arranged marriage is valuable, especially because strict gender roles are such a part of fascism usually. End quote. So yes, it is true that in fascism, when fascism has arisen in the past, there have been ultra strict gender roles, and it is interesting that Lita is joining a culture that has that. Do want to point out, by the way, if you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube, we are broadcasting live at youtube.com/itcodingtv, which you should subscribe to if you want to get more completely impromptu broadcasts like this, which we barely planned at all.
You
Uh,
never know
you
when a
never know.
broadcast
You
is
never
gonna
know what's
happen.
going to pop off. So you got to subscribe at youtube.com/itcodingtv. Anyway, you can also get the audio version of this podcast wherever you get your podcast at Decoding TV on the internet. All right, Patrick, I only have one other quote I wanted to bring up. Um,
Okay.
and this is the possibility of doing a Princess Leia cameo. This is Tony Gilroy talking with Screen Rant. And he says here again, I love the way he talks about it. There were some nutrients for a scene between her and Mon Mothma. That if she was going there, sorry, let me. So, I'm reading this quote, and I'll just say it doesn't make much sense. So I think I might have transplanted the quote wrong. So let me like look this up again. So this is from Screen Rant. Let me pulling up the article again. Yeah, no, I think I did this correctly. Okay.
Hmm.
There were some conversations early on. There was much to be made. This is in the sketching stage. This is in the really soggy beginning, trying to figure out what to do. Because I was trying to make that investiture week 1 idea. I don't even know what he's referring to there. Do you know what that is about, Patrick? Um,
No.
I was trying to get the most out of that investiture week and those parties that we have. Alden's party now, and we're making a thing out of it. And we were trying to figure out the timeline where she would be in the Senate. Because remember, when we meet Princess Leia, she is a member of the Senate, is she not? Um, in
Uh,
in
I,
in A New Hope.
well, Now that's a great question. I should know this. I call myself a Star Wars fan, but well, because the Senate is dissolved like by the middle of that movie.
Mhm.
So it's like, do they call her
Yeah.
a senator, the
She
senator
she
from
was a member of
Alderaan?
the Imperial Senate. That is what is described online. So,
Well,
any
look, as we know, her mom was a teenage queen turned senator. So yeah, sure. Let's let like 17-year-old Princess Leia be a senator too.
there were some nutrients for a scene between her and Mon Mothma that if she was going there at 16 and Mon Mothma had gone to the Senate when she was 16, there were some basic cool things for a scene, but it never got past that. And then here's the interesting part, Patrick. And it never went to the casting stage. Or it never got more real than that. I remember talking to Kathy Kennedy about it and talking to Pablo Hidalgo about it, but it never got traction, and then it became a distraction, end quote. Anyway, I thought that was interesting that he said it never got to the casting stage because
Mhm.
obviously somebody else played Princess Leia in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, right?
A small child.
A small child, right? So, and I don't think she would have been old enough to play young Princess Leia. So then it's like they would have had to cast someone else as Princess Leia. And I have to say, Patrick Willems, this is I'm inviting more. Like the purpose of this podcast was to like quell some of the criticisms, but I'm inviting more criticism when I say the Princess Leia at the end of Rogue One still looks like dog shit. I still
Yes.
it still rips me out of the movie to see CGI Princess Leia, and honestly, it's shocking to me because she's only on screen for like her face is only on screen for literally less than I'm gonna say 5 seconds. And I have seen de-aging technology that looks incredible. Like all the Marvel de-aging is amazing. Samuel L. Jackson in Captain Marvel, Michelle Pfeiffer in the Ant-Man. Like I think a lot of Michael Douglas I think a lot like it's possible to like CG. I know those people are still alive, but it's possible to like create like a fake version of someone's face and have it look real. Um, and I just don't understand why they couldn't nail it with the 5 seconds of Princess Leia that we saw at the end of Rogue One. And also, if they had done a cameo of Princess Leia, on the one hand, it would have been cringeworthy, but on the other hand, it would be nice if the last image I have of Princess Leia is not the ghoulish CG recreation at the end of Rogue One. So
Well,
those are my thoughts, Patrick Williams. What do you think?
David, I must remind you, the last image of Princess Leia, well, of Carrie Fisher Princess Leia,
Mm-hmm.
is not the end of Rogue One.
Uh huh. Uh
It is
huh.
the flashback in Rise of Skywalker of her training with Luke Skywalker,
Oh yeah. Thank you for that.
where where
Thanks for
where
that memory,
I
Patrick.
where she's played by Billie Lourd, Carrie Fisher's daughter, with a digital face
Mm,
composited
thank
onto her.
you.
So
Thank you for that.
I'm here to remind you of that movie. That is my purpose on this podcast. But I will just say
Also, so
that I
Digital Arsenal in the chat says young Luthen is a great example of de aging. I thought they did a good job with young Luthen. Again, these are people that are still alive that they de-age, as opposed to Carrie Fisher's passed away. So, but I don't know. I imagine the technologies are adjacent. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead, Patrick.
yeah, I have really become pretty anti digital de-aging in general.
Mm-hmm.
Even like in most of the Marvel instances where it's pointed to as being like the best versions of it, it's a thing that like uh what it always just comes down to is when I'm aware that it's there, all I'm doing is looking at and like even if I'm not trying to, my brain is like subconsciously trying to find the seams or like thinking about the de-aging and as opposed to like engaging in the scene. And that's what even when it looks good. It's the thing where it's like you look at like the opening scene of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and it's like if you pause on like any frame, it looks like flawless. It's like there's
Yeah,
Harrison Ford's face, but the entire it's like,
but it's
but then
old Harrison Ford's voice coming out of his
yeah,
mouth.
yes, and then when
They
it's in
didn't de-age
motion,
the voice.
no,
Anyway,
and yeah, and when it's in motion, all I'm doing is thinking about the face, and I'm like, it's
yeah,
not
yeah.
real. And so I am just fully, and like with the sole exception of its original use in The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, because in that movie, him being young is like the character, like it's an
It is
effect in
supposed
the
to it's
movie.
supposed to look creepy. Yeah, like that's
Right, but
actually
and it's
okay.
like
Yeah.
the characters are, like, shocked by it, and so we're supposed to be focusing on that, but every other time where it's just a flashback scene where it's like, "Oh, we can make them young now," it always takes me out of the movie. I would rather it not be done, and that extends to then just digital people. Like, I've talked before about how CGI Tarkin sucks, uh,
Yes.
and,
Absolutely.
CGI Leia sucks. And so, yeah, I'm very glad that Leia was not in this show. There's no need for her. There wouldn't have added anything. The one thing I'm curious about is because we've already discussed the recasting of Bail Organa. Uh, would since this is his show, like Andor is Tony Gilroy's show. On Rogue One, that was not his movie. That was like,
Right.
a mercenary assignment. He's coming in to just like fix some problems.
The
On
way he
this,
described it was there's a corpse on the table. What are you going to do? Could someone come in
yep,
and save it? That's the way he
exactly.
described Rogue One. Yeah.
And so my question is, would he have been like, yeah, sure, we'll just do a CGI person, or would he have been like, no, that's bullshit. We're gonna cast an actor. I would like to believe the latter. Uh, but yeah, that's the only thing I'm curious about.
So to go back to the original point, Patrick, you missing the Leia cameo in Andor season 2?
No, no, David. I am perfectly content without
Mm,
it.
wow, shocking. Uh, same to be honest. But like I said, the recasting of Bail Organa is like wow. I don't think it's the first time they've recast a major character like that, but it is probably one of the only times they've done that. Right? Is that right? Um,
I assume we're not counting instances where it's like, Ewan McGregor instead of Alec
right,
Guinness.
right.
Right. Recasting, yeah, just like switching actors, like within the
Within the
timeline.
same time frame, and also they're still alive. Both people are still alive. Um,
Right, simply not available.
yeah.
That's a really good question. And again, like I said in our last episode, I I want to believe that people at Lucasfilm will look at Andor and learn lessons from it, from the many good choices it makes. Whether it's like, oh, what if we recast instead of doing like, creepy, soulless CGI people, or what if we tried to make good shows instead of Ahsoka season 2? Um, I
Wow.
would like that,
That's
but I'm
not, it hasn't even
also
come out yet, Patrick. Maybe it
yeah.
will be good.
Well,
It
well, oh,
won't.
well,
It
oh,
won't
well,
be.
oh, yeah.
It
Well,
won't
hey,
be.
they announced at Star Wars Celebration, Ahsoka is recasting a role, but that is because of a death.
Yeah. But I mean, even that is like that's progress. Like that they're not like
That
trying
isn't
to
that
re.
pathetic? Oh, this is progress. That they're recasting a role where the actor died instead of just doing digital Ray Stevenson.
It would have been. It's fascinating to like. I think, in my opinion, right, like one of the biggest things that ails Star Wars is its obsession with the past, right?
Yes.
Its obsession with what has come before, and one of the symptoms of that obsession is until recently refusing to recast people who have died. Right? They didn't recast, or not even people who have died. People who have aged out of the role. You can imagine what it would be like if they recast Luke Skywalker, right? But instead they brought him back as a CG de-aged person,
I
and
hate it. I
in
hate
what,
it so
Obi-Wan
much.
Kenobi, right? Yeah. And
No, wait. In Obi-Wan Kenobi?
the series, right? Wasn't he in that?
No. No, he first showed up at the end of Mandalorian season
Yeah,
2,
no, he's
and
also Mandalorian as well. But he wasn't he in
no, in Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke Skywalker is a child,
oh,
played by a
okay,
different
okay.
actor.
Sorry,
Yeah,
my bad.
he's not old enough yet. No, it was Book of Boba Fett.
That's what I meant to say. That's what I meant to say. Um, so you can imagine like Luke Skywalker could almost be like a a 007 type of deal where like every time a new Luke Skywalker is announced, it's like a big event. This generation can have its Luke Skywalker, but they chose not to go that way, and I feel it has really really hurt them creatively in terms of the options that they have.
It
Um,
just makes me afraid of the future where and it's this thing I'm like, is this because of, like, Dave Filoni coming from animation where it's like, "Oh,
mm,
whatever, we can just they're all animated. We can use them forever." But I'm like, you know, Star Wars has this obsession with the past that I think is crippling. I like, I agree with you there. And but it's not just the past, it's also just like they're afraid to move out of this like time span of like 60 years in like the giant timeline. Uh and I know that Andor fits in there as well, but I'm just like what worries me is because they don't seem to be learning like I think enough hardcore fans like CGI Luke that I worry that people like Filoni are just like, "Oh, wow, we for decades going forward, we could just make movies about like 25-year-old Luke Skywalker set between the events of episode 6 and 7 because we never, he never has to age now."
yeah.
I'm afraid of that. And or like when are they going to be like David, David, we in discussing recasting, we
Yeah.
left out one massive example.
Oh, okay.
The example that I think may have been what they learned the wrong lessons from.
Right, which someone in the chat actually brought up, which is Mr. Miguel says,
Solo.
"I wonder if the negative reaction to the Solo film is chiefly responsible for Star Wars' resistance to recasting. To be clear, I love Alden Ehrenreich. I think he's great." End quote. Anyway, yeah, I think you are right
Yeah.
that uh, Patrick, they learned the wrong lessons from the failure of Solo: A Star Wars Story. They learned it's actually, I'm actually like in awe of how wrong they learned because it's like the lesson was, oh, we can't recast it. We can't recast it. And it's like that's not why people didn't like that movie. In my opinion. Like I don't think it's because you
Yeah.
had a new person playing Han Solo,
No, because you know what? They also had someone new playing Lando Calrissian. and
Yes.
that actually worked out great, and I doubt it'll ever happen, but they've been talking about like a Lando movie or show or whatever
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah.
Um I no, I mean, first of all, it's just like I really think just casting Harrison Ford is just an especially difficult person to replace. He's just so distinctive that I think there's some actors who you can recast, and then Harrison Ford I just think is a difficult one to replicate. I think Aaron Rick is fine in that movie. I think he's a very good actor. I like him a lot in other things. I think that was kind of like unwinnable. That there was like that. But I think that movie is just inherently pointless. That is a story that no one was asking for. It is basically a movie that seems to be dedicated to giving him the character arc that he had in the original movie, and like he like at the end of Solo, he like becomes sympathetic toward the rebellion because he meets like a proto rebellion, and it's like no, that's what happens in the like
Right.
it is, and then there's like the Darth Maul stuff and trying to set up like a trilogy. Baffling choices there,
Yep.
but I think Aaron Rick like unfairly received a lot of the blame
Yeah.
for that movie's failure. And I think Lucasfilm was just like, we the people want the characters to look exactly one way and only ever be one actor. And I think that was a profoundly incorrect lesson to learn.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Patrick Willems. I think that's going to do it for us. That's thanks for sticking around a little bit longer. But I prepared a buffet of juicy morsels from the post Andor discourse,
And they
and
were juicy.
you have feasted upon them. And I hope everyone has enjoyed the conversation. Any closing thoughts, Patrick Willems? And I do want to make sure to shout out Patrick Willems' YouTube channel, which you can check out at youtube.com/Patrick H. Willems. But Patrick, any closing thoughts on Andor season 2? This will almost definitely be the last time we podcast about it. So Uh,
I imagine so. Actually, may I make a plug?
sure. Yeah, of course.
Or actually, this I think you had texted me about this like weeks and weeks ago. Where so I over the years, I think in 2018 and then in 2020, I made 2 videos called "What Do We Want from a Star Wars Movie?" Kind of
Mhm.
like checking in on like the state of Star Wars and why people are reacting to things just like what culturally people seem to like want from Star Wars at the time. And I think you texted me like an email you received saying like, "Oh, Patrick should do a third one of those."
Mhm.
Uh
Yep. Sure.
and then we but then
Sounds
we
plausible.
yeah, but we didn't. I think we were like, oh, we'll talk about it on the next episode, and then we forgot to. What I do want to say is that I kind of did that. Uh, about a little over a year ago, at like the end of 2023, I made something called the Patrick H. Willems Star Wars Holiday Special that is exclusively on Nebula. It was a Webby Award honoree recently. It was like a runner-up to being nominated for a Webby Award for Best Comedy Special. But in that, it is half wacky 1960s style Christmas special, but also half video essay about the state of Star Wars and about it's like uh you know it being sucked into this black hole of nostalgia, which, with the sole exception of Andor, it hasn't really been able to like break free from. And I get into all of the streaming shows there. I watched all of Ahsoka for that project, and so that really is the most until this podcast, the most I have spoken and like analyzed Star Wars in years. And so if you at all are curious about like my extended takes on like the other Disney Plus shows, I would point you toward that because
Okay, so
I get into all of them.
it's on Patrick Willems' Nebula page, and what is the name of the video?
It's called the Patrick H. Willems Star Wars Holiday Special.
Check it out, folks. In closing, I did want to read this excerpt from Dan Gvozden's excellent recap of Andor Season 2, episodes 10, 11, 12. Check out the recaps at decodingtv.com. Subscribe for free to get more recaps in the future. But he wrote about the end of the show quite beautifully. I just want to read it here. We see Bix at the end. She's holding Cassian's baby. By the way, Tony Gilroy has since said that in his headcanon, Bix was pregnant at the time that she left Cassian. So like that was a part of the reason why she left. So FYI. Anyway, she tells the fussing child it's okay and smiles. Then the show cuts to black. Andor is over. I'm reading Dan Gvozden here at decodingtv.com. I cried. As a father who fears the accelerated growth of global authoritarian forces whose tactics and atrocities have run parallel to the stories in Andor, I can only hope to offer my 3-year-old son a future born from the kinds of selfless actions demonstrated by so many of the characters across both seasons of this masterful show. I could think of no more touching ending to Andor than the retroactive reveal that Cassian's legacy lives on despite his impending death. For the entire duration of the show, the one thing we thought we knew was that despite Cassian's sacrifices, his personal journey was one of tragedy and loss. We must assume that he knew nothing of his child's existence, but the reality is that his life was spent fighting for a better world for his child. Cassian's journey is recontextualized, and the show's title also takes on a different meaning. Andor is no longer one person, but a familial lineage that will exist and thrive due to Cassian's sacrifice. End quote. Anyway, beautiful sentiment. Again, subscribe to decodingtv.com for free to get recaps like this in the future. And I just love the idea of the whole the final shot recontextualizes the title of the show. Andor is not one dude, Patrick Willems. Andor is a line of people now.
It is one guy and /or many, many more.
He's Patrick Willems. I'm David Chen. We'll see you later.